What does that do to?
There's one below this office.
Wow. What does that do to? What does that do to the ability of these protests to sustain themselves? They do not have a single charismatic leader. They're not the product of long-standing organized opposition that seems to have some sort of coherent organizational center. Do you sense that the protests will melt away because they've been relatively spontaneous?
I don't think these protests are going to melt away. They're starting for a variety of reasons, but mostly they're starting because people have had enough. They have had enough of the corruption. They have had enough. It's not just the people in the United States. I've been listening to a lot of the analysts. I've been plugged in over this. Keep talking about Twitter and Facebook. This didn't have anything to do with Twitter and Facebook. This had to do with people's dignity, people's pride. People are not able to feed their families. I was talking to a protester today. He has 2 kids, 40 years old. He can't make his car payments. He bought his car on a loan. He is worried that his children won't have a good future. That's why he's out. Now, the protests and the Twitter and all the social networking stuff helps. It helps inspire people, coordinate, but that's not why they're out. They're out because of mismanagement and a system that has really gotten so far away from its people. And many Egyptians believe the reason that Mubarak and other regimes in the Arab world, if we want to go on that route, have been able to become so separate from their people is because they have gotten blanket support from the United States. And the statements we've been hearing from the United States, from the Secretary of State, from the White House in Egypt sound very much like an endorsement for Mubarak. Just make a few announcements, talk about reform, and don't massacre the people, don't have a Tiananmen, and that'll be good enough. That's not the way people see it here. They think that Mubarak should go. They want to push the reset button, and they think the United States has been propping up this government and continues to prop up this government.
Richard, is there a credible replacement for Mubarak if Mubarak does go, and does that affect how sustainable the protests are? That's the hardest question. And is there a credible replacement? If you were to replace Mubarak with a similar replacement, you'd have to find a strong man from within the armed services, maybe a better strong man, someone who is a little bit more sensitive to the economic needs of the people, allows them to do better. I think that's probably what the United States would want in a situation like this, to have a Mubarak 2.0, a better Mubarak who's more understandable, but somebody they can also deal with, instead of unleashing the streets of Cairo onto the political system. The United States and other people talk about just having the will of the people take over. Well, the problem is this government and this people have been undereducated for a long time. They've been fed many, many conspiracy theories, sometimes deliberately by the government so that they don't focus on real problems. There is a very large reactionary population here, and some Egyptians themselves are afraid of what will happen if there is just a kind of mob justice, that organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood will take advantage of this movement and come to power. So how this plays out is something clearly Washington is nervous about, and also many Egyptians are nervous about. Richard, let me just ask you one last question, and then I hope you can get some sleep. I know that you and I went to college in the same place at the same time, although we didn't hang out at that time. As soon as you left college, you moved to Cairo, and you lived there for years.
Why'd you have to add that in, that we didn't hang out? What was all that about?
Because actually, I was super unpleasant in college, and I don't want you to be damned with my reputation. You've always been a charmer. Me, not so much.
All right, we were there, although you didn't want to talk to me. That's fine. That's
fine, yeah. Let's say it was
just so that's public.
But after we both left college without speaking to each other, you moved to Cairo and lived in Cairo for years. That's where you learned Arabic, and it's where you got your first education in the Middle East. Being back there now, how different is it from the mid-'90s, and how, it's just personally, how significant does this feel?
It feels incredibly significant. It's been something that I've been thinking about all day, really. I lived here right after I never spoke to you in college, and I came here and lived on a very little money, spending most of my time weeping that you wouldn't talk to me. And I was living in a very poor neighborhood here, and there was a sense of solidarity and community at the time. People were poor, but
pretty much everyone was poor at the time, and there wasn't this kind of frustration that you feel now. There was almost an honor in poverty here, and people still worked in small factories. There was a lot produced locally. The economy and really the world economy has changed dramatically since then. The gap between the rich and poor has grown exponentially. There are now multi-million-dollar homes just on the outskirts of in the suburbs of Cairo, and people have gotten much poorer. Their inflation has gone up dramatically, and the government has not done very much. And that is what's pushing people further. And I can understand the concerns that Egyptians have, because the people on the street, the people who have a very similar mentality to what they had then, are not necessarily asking for what we think they're asking for. They are not asking for a necessarily liberal democracy that is going to be pro-Western. What they want is still to be determined. And again, going